team to assist students in applying to med schools and dentistry schools, and even non-health schools like pre-law. But my specific area is really helping students transition from Western to whatever goals they have after college. And so for our pre-professional students, that's obviously going to look like applying to med schools and law schools and PT schools and all sorts of different things. And I have additional resources for my pre-professional students on best practices on writing your personal statements and writing your resume or your CV and things of that nature. Really, I think that the thing that I would like to impress upon you as first-year students, that I know that Zach is probably also going to say as we go throughout this presentation, is that your preparation into these professional schooling really starts this semester in getting certain experiences and job shadowing and just collecting the data that you need in order to be successful whenever you go to apply to these schools. But we can help you with the planning part of that, so that it's as stress-free as it can possibly be. But that is my role in the Career Center. I have a focus on health science students, but I can also help any student who makes an appointment with me.
And I'm Sibley Bryan, so I'm the director of the Math Tutoring Center, and the reason why I'm here is because the Math Tutoring Center facilitates MCAT, GRE, and LSAT prep resources. And so each semester we try to find and employ someone to offer you MCAT guidance, preparation for studying, someone who's gone through the actual MCAT themselves, who's one of your peers. Typically, we find tutors that have gone pre-med and have successfully navigated the MCAT to offer you some guidance too and give you their best suggestions and sort of their best practices so that you can have a successful MCAT session and start preparing for that now as you get into your core courses. And we also offer GRE prep sessions. So our GRE preparation session usually happens during the grad education week. So that is the week of October 20th this year. So we'll offer at least one GRE overview that you can attend if you're interested in taking the GRE. And then we also offer LSAT prep courses. So each fall and spring, we recruit a local attorney from Silva to come and guide you through a 2-week course to prepare for the LSAT. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
All right, thank you both. And just so y'all know, they will be assisting me. Carrie knows she is more than welcome to step on my toes if at some point during this presentation I give poor information or bad information. Sibley or Carrie are both more than welcome to step in and correct me. Being in this position is not about being humble on my part. I want to make sure that you are getting the best information possible. If that means it comes from somebody else other than me, that is fine. Our goals are to make sure you are as prepared as possible when it comes to applying to professional school so that you have the greatest chance of getting in. And none of us do that by being overconfident or cocky. We understand that we have as much information as we have, but other people probably have more. So if we ever do say, hey, I don't have that information for you, let me get it for you, I will find it, we will do that. We are here to help in whatever way we can. So we will start right now. Okay, introductions, we just did that. Emily Sharp is not with us tonight, but those of you who are in the Honors College, Emily Sharp is my parallel in the Honors College. So if you're an Honors College student and you need pre-professional advising, you should meet with her. Not that I don't want to meet with you, but there are quite a few of y'all, and between Emily and I, we also have other duties outside of pre-professional advising. So we try to share the wealth. She will advise honors college students. I will advise non-honors college students. We usually give very much the same information and we offer the same assistance in everything we do. So don't be concerned that honors college students or non-honors college students might be getting services or advice that the others aren't. We really learn the same information from the same places. So a quick quote to keep in mind if any of you are Lord of the Rings fans, or even, Game of Thrones fans. This will apply throughout your entire path of getting to professional school. One doesn't simply walk into Mordor. That was from Lord of the Rings, talking about the path to getting the One Ring destroyed. Yes, I'm a bit of a nerd, but this is very applicable. Getting into med school, getting into PT school, getting into law school, it's not as simple as Reese Witherspoon makes it out to be. It's not as though you're going to apply and you're just going to get in. There is a path. There are steps you must take. And we're here to outline a lot of those just to make sure you're not wasting your money or your time when it comes to submitting those applications. So you don't want to be like this guy, but if you want to be like a Sean Bean character, be more like him. His motto was "Winter is coming." So he was always prepared. Being prepared for the next step is very important in this process. And so that's why if you're looking at Sean Bean's characters, you want to be more like Eddard Stark over Boromir. Moving on from being a nerd. So what are we going to cover this evening? First, we're going to cover the pathways that we can advise for. And we could advise for more pathways. Reasons we don't currently: we may not have enough student interest. There may not be formal training. The specific interest may not be covered by the governing body that Emily and I are licensed or certified under, what have you. We're members of the National Association for Advisors of the Health Professions, as well as SAPLA, which is the Southeastern Association of Law Advisors, excuse me. Each of those bodies kind of guide us towards what we can and then shouldn't advise for. Certain areas of health science are not really covered by that governing body, and as such, very specific areas of law aren't covered. So sometimes we'll tell you it might be better for you to go talk to somebody specific, and sometimes we'll tell you we just don't know, but we will always give you whatever information we can. We'll also cover valuable resources on campus. We will cover centralized application services and why they matter, what makes a good applicant, what your major should be or shouldn't be or can be, and then what the pre-professional advisors can do for you. Again, that's me and Emily, and what you can be working on right now. So what pathways do we advise for? Only 10 are going to pop up on the screen. We do advise for 11 at this time. Pre-athletic training is not something that we have done a whole lot of advising for. It's rather new. We will talk about that shortly. But with this information in mind, each of these areas are areas we have had plenty of students apply for. Each of these areas are areas where we have advised students in the past. So if you don't see your area on here, again, don't be alarmed. We can probably still advise for it to some degree, but we're going to get into this and discuss each of these in a little bit more detail. So if you see the area of interest that you are going towards pop up on the screen, feel free to take a screenshot, feel free to take a picture with your phone. But remember, this will always also be posted on YouTube. So you don't have to be alarmed if you happen to miss a slide or something like that. It will all be posted for you to reference later. So pre-athletic training, what makes it different than potentially other focuses? First off, you do need to have a bachelor's degree to be able to apply to athletic training programs. Most of the athletic training programs do have prerequisite hours. Those are very specific hours. You do have to complete a certain number of observation hours, and those are going to be with a licensed athletic trainer. And we'll get into why observation hours matter here in a little bit. And then you must take the GRE, which is the standardized test that's required for athletic training programs. Things to consider: fall 2020, that's the last semester any program in the US can admit undergraduate students into a bachelor's program. All of the athletic training programs across the nation are moving to a master's degree model. That's why we offer pre-athletic training now. As such, all of the bachelor's programs have to be concluded by fall 2022. And so that's when the last freshman group, so to say, can be admitted into those programs. WCU's athletic training bachelor's program no longer accepts new students. They stopped accepting students summer of 2019, so it's been a bit now. And then something to keep in mind, different states may require specific certification for work in that state. I do think this is the only slide I included that in, but many of the focuses that we'll be looking at do require specific certification for the state that you will be working in. And then if you'll notice on each of these slides, the primary website you can get to find out more information on these focuses will be down here on the bottom left. So feel free to scribble that down on a piece of paper, or again, take a picture with your phone. I tried to find the shortest possible link to include on these pages so that they would be easy and quick for you to reference. Pre-chiropractic is one of our smaller offerings when it comes to students who have this interest, but I would say it's probably one of the more specialized as well and has a few nuances that a lot of students don't quite realize sometimes. So first off, getting into chiropractic school doesn't necessarily require a bachelor's degree. Some schools will accept 3 years of undergraduate school credit. Before enrollment, naturally, all of those schools have prerequisite requirements. So you want to make sure if you're trying to do that, that your 90 hours of credit are going to meet the prerequisites for the specific schools you're applying to. Across the board, it is a governing body decision. Pre-chiropractic students need to have a 3.0 GPA. Some schools do have provisions to allow students with a 2.75 GPA or higher under probationary admission status, but not all schools offer that. So if you are wanting to go to chiropractic school, your GPA is an important part of that. Things to consider. Right now, there are only 19 Doctor of Chiropractic programs in the US. There are a few more across the world that are also chiropractic program, and this is actually 3 more than last year. In the past year, they have had 3 more schools open up, but 19 is still a relatively small number. If you are wanting to be a chiropractic student, that is something else to consider that tends to make it rather competitive, but also chiropractic programs aren't as in demand as some of the other programs we'll get into later on. So as long as you're a competitive applicant, usually you still have a pretty good chance of getting into a chiropractic school. And then I've already spoken about the fact that not all programs require a bachelor's degree. So keep that in mind if that is your goal. Pre-dentistry, again, completion of bachelor's degree is required for this particular focus. Completion of prerequisite coursework also required. You must complete the DAT, which is the dental admissions test, and then you must complete observation hours. That is for most schools, but it is also highly recommended. Dentistry tends to be a rather interesting field when it comes to whether a student is going to definitely want to do that or definitely not. I have found that many students who go and observe a dentist in real life. So they go in, they sit with the dentist, they see what they do for a day. A lot of them tend to be more interested in doing dental hygienist work because they have more of that client interaction. But you won't learn that usually unless you go and do your observation hours. Things to consider, it will require a strong background in chemistry and biology. If you think about dentistry, it is almost strictly chemistry and biology. There's some physics involved as well. So if you're going into dentistry, those are 2 majors that might interest you because it's going to be along the same fields. Many students opt to major in one of those 2 subjects, but it is not required. I have seen a good number of students also major in business because they plan on opening their own dentistry practice. Summer enrichment programs and education programs are available for undergraduate students. There are a couple of schools across the state of North Carolina that offer those programs during normal summers. I don't know that any of those programs happened this past summer due to COVID-19. Pre-law is a funny little group, not because the students are odd or anything like that, but pre-law is probably one of the simpler programs to apply for. Most law schools, very few law schools to my knowledge, require prerequisite courses. So most law schools do not require any prerequisite course of any sort. However, they are looking for applicants that have strong skills in analytical and critical thinking. They want to see students who have done research, whether that's strong research as a part of a course or even outside course research done with a professor, strong reading and writing, as well as oral communication skills. And all of these skills outside of research will also be tested on the LSAT. And the LSAT is probably one of the more difficult standardized tests you can take. If you are interested in doing pre-law, that's something you certainly want to research and prep for, because the LSAT as a test is built to be rather difficult. It's not necessarily built to just test your knowledge. It's also built to see how you react in certain situations. One of those situations being a very stressful test. So keep that in mind if you are looking at going pre-law. With pre-law, there are no major requirements as well, so you can major in whatever you want to. Usually students will major in business because business law tends to be a big focus, but you certainly don't have to. And if you know of a field of law that you're planning on going into after you graduate from law, getting a bachelor's degree in that field can always be a good idea. Something else to consider, very few students with science degrees apply to law schools. Those fields just tend to not line up very well. So if you are somebody who's wanting to go to law school but also has an affinity for science, getting a degree in a science field could make you stand out on your application. Not necessarily in a positive or negative way, but you'll stand out because you will be a bit of an oddball with that application due to the fact that so few science majors apply to law school. Pre-medicine is definitely one of the big top three that we have when it comes to the number of students applying or going through the pre-professional pathways. Things to keep in mind with pre-medicine. A lot of students do think pre-medicine is just one broad field, but it's actually broken up into two different fields. You have osteopathic medicine and you have allopathic medicine. The difference between those is it can be kind of broad depending on who you ask, but when it comes to who can practice what, all doctors are doctors. A doctor with a Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine degree can practice at the same places in the same ways as a doctor with an MED. The big thing is an osteopathic doctor may approach problems in a different way than a doctor who has been trained at a allopathic program. So what is required? A bachelor's degree is required for all med school applicants. That is a guaranteed. Some med schools may have what's called a pre-med program, in which case you could apply there early and work through to complete a bachelor's degree in their program and then have a leg up when it comes to applying to their medical program directly. But very few of them do that. Usually they're going to want to see applicants have a full bachelor's degree. Completion of prerequisite courses. Sorry about that typo. That should be of. Prerequisite courses when it comes to med schools can be very specific, but at the same time, most med schools are going to have very similar prerequisites. If you are looking at med schools, I highly recommend reviewing each of the med schools you are applying to just to make sure you have covered each of their prerequisite courses. Completion of the MCAT is important and is required by pretty much all med schools. Every once in a while, you'll hear whispers of a school that isn't requiring that at a certain point in time, but usually med schools are pretty standard in that they're going to require the MCAT. Completion of observation hours is also important. Medical schools are very much focused on their numbers. So number of students who apply to their schools, number of students who get into their schools, number of students who complete their programs, and having students complete observation hours work towards their numbers. They don't want to admit students who are unsure if they want to become a doctor. And so that's where observation hours really become important for med school as well as all these other pathways. Observation hours are important because the schools want to make sure you know what you're getting into, it's the field you're wanting to go to, and you understand what the jobs, what the lifestyle is like for the type of field you're trying to get into. Application through AMCAS or AACOMAS, depending on which field you're wanting to apply to, is important. I see the comment, what about students with EMS experience? I'm not sure which specific field that applied to, but EMS experience, we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to the more generic answers. But a lot of times EMS experience will count when it comes to observation / volunteer / experience hours, with the exception of PA school. So we will talk about that in a few minutes as well. And then something else to keep in mind, state-run medical schools usually have requirements that students applying to their schools and being accepted are residents of those schools. Kind of goes with paying your taxes. You're paying for that school as a tax-paying individual within that state, so you're going to get preference for that school. So if you are applying to a state-run medical school, it's important that you keep an eye on what their requirements are. And then osteopathic schools traditionally have been slightly easier to gain acceptance to. That is something that's beginning to change. Osteopathic schools are becoming more in demand. I think osteopathic medicine as a whole practice is becoming more accepted and more favored by the upcoming generations of students who are applying to those schools. And so that, that gain in it being slightly easier to get into is diminishing year by year. Pre-optometry, this is another one of our smaller groups, but it doesn't mean we will do less advising for you. What's important, you must complete a bachelor's degree. You must also complete prerequisite coursework for the schools you're applying to, and then you must complete the optometry applications test or admissions test, also called the OAT. The optometry test is actually run by the same people that run the DAT. So you will see similarities between those two tests, but they are testing different information. Due to the low number of optometry schools in the nation, states without schools will usually have a contract with specific institutions in states nearby, such that they give preference to their state's residents, as well as the residents of the state where the school exists. A lot of times, if you apply to a school like that, your tuition is also going to be lowered down to in-state levels. And then depending on school requirements, a bachelor's degree may not be required for admission. This is not as prevalent with as it is with chiropractic schools or pharmacy schools, which we'll touch on in a few minutes. But it is something to look at if you are wanting to become an optometrist. Occupational therapy. Occupational therapy as a whole, you must complete a bachelor's degree, you must complete the prerequisite coursework, earn at least a 3.0 GPA. Occupational therapy is one of the fields that tends to require a higher base GPA, so that's something to keep in mind. You must complete observation hours and then complete the GRE. With OT schools, the GRE is not required by all schools, but it is required by most schools. Usually it's going to be to your benefit to at least take it, such that when you apply to schools that do require it, you have that on file. And a side note with this, master's degree is currently all that is required to become an occupational therapist, but as of right now, they're working on adjusting that, and a doctoral level degree will be required by 2027. Pre-PA, this is another one of our three big fields that we see a lot of students go into. There are a couple of nuances with becoming a physician assistant that a lot of students don't tend to understand at the beginning. So this is one we really like to talk to students about. First off, you must complete a bachelor's degree. You must complete the prerequisite coursework, and there is a lot of prerequisite coursework for most PA programs. So if you're wanting to become a PA, definitely focus on what the prerequisites are for the schools you are applying to, because there will be many. You must complete the GRE for most programs. Some PA programs have started accepting the MCAT, and then some PA programs don't require a standardized test at all. But again, those are so few and far between that it's probably going to be in your best interest to complete the GRE regardless of which schools you're applying to. And then you must complete observation or work hour requirements. That is important. Most PA programs require that you have a certain number of paid work hours in a healthcare field. Students who are in their undergraduate experience sometimes get these hours while they're getting their bachelor's degree. There are certain fields you can go into where you get this experience. As I mentioned before, doing the EMT program here at Western will not get you that experience. The experience cannot be associated with an academic program. And so it must be a standard paid job that you are working. A lot of students will become a CNA, clinical nursing assistant. Some students will work at a nursing home to get that client care experience. But if that's something you're looking at doing and you know you want to try to get that experience before you graduate, please come and meet with me. We can also have you meet with Carrie to get more information on what may be available in the area. PA programs usually expect a greater amount of health-related experience. That goes with what we previously said. A lot of times you see the more successful applicants going into PA programs being people who have worked in a healthcare field for a number of years. That's not to say if you're planning on doing this as soon as you graduate, you won't get in. Just with PA, the traditional student is not your traditional, I just graduated from undergraduate. A lot of PA programs, the traditional student is what we would normally classify as a non-traditional student. They're coming back and they're getting more education after having worked professionally for a while. PA programs have a higher number of female to male students, though there is no preference to female students for these programs. I've had students ask me that in the past. I'm a male, I'm trying to go to PA school. Is that going to help me get in? Not necessarily, just because the male students are minorities in those programs doesn't give them a leg up when it comes to getting in. And then emphasis on life experience as well as academic experience. It just goes with the nature of being a physician assistant, that schools are interested in what you've done thus far, what type of life experience you have. Pre-pharmacy kind of stands in the realm with optometry and chiropractic in that it doesn't require a full bachelor's degree to apply. So it does require prerequisite coursework, and each pharmacy school is going to have its own list of which courses are required. And usually pharmacy schools are going to require the PCAT as the standardized test that's required for students to be admitted. This may not be required of all applicants. It depends on what your GPA is and what prerequisite courses you may or may not have completed at the time you're applying. But usually you can assume that taking the PCAT is in your best interest just to be able to apply to as many schools as possible. If opting to apply before completing a bachelor's degree, advising should be sought from the school or schools you are wanting to apply to, in addition to advising at WCU. That's important because, yes, at Western, you probably have a major declared, you probably got an 8-semester plan that you're going to be following, but a pharmacy school will be able to help guide you with the courses you should be taking at Western that they know will transfer into their school. That Western offers. That way, if for some reason a pharmacy school requires Chem 139, but you accidentally take Chem 132, the pharmacy admissions expert can advise you, you need to make sure to take Chem 139 for our school. Pre-physical therapy, this is the third big field, and truthfully, this is the largest field of pre-professional students we have at Western, and it's been that way over the past 5 years, I believe. So what's important? Complete a bachelor's degree, complete the prerequisite coursework, complete the GRE, and complete observation hours. Observation hours are very important for physical therapy because it seems as though many students kind of have preconceived notions about what being a physical therapist might be. So that's why many PT schools really emphasize those observation hours. They want to make sure that pre-PT students and then PT students know what they're going to be doing and what they can expect out of that field. This is currently one of the most competitive fields to apply to, not just at Western, but across the nation. If you look at the requirements to get into a PT school right now, they are normally higher than what's required to get into a med school of a similar caliber in a similar region. So physical therapy is harder to get into right now. WCU students do receive a minor increase in their application to WCU's PT school. We do know that a lot of students come to Western because they're wanting to go to Western's PT program. That is fine. Western's PT school looks out for that. They're very interested in WCU students. But when it comes to what that increase on your application looks like, if you and someone else have very similar information, so similar GPA, similar GRE scores, similar observation hours, similar life experience, as long as those things are similar or equal, you will probably be picked over them. But if that person has something that's slightly better than you, that might put each of y'all on more of a level playing field. So don't bank on that increase in your application being what gets you in. You still have to be a very competitive student. And then PT programs will often have a regional or state preference for students in their respective areas. This is not for all PT schools. This is not necessarily for all regions, but it's more for the more in-demand areas. Western's PT program has more of a preference for students from the Western North Carolina region. So that's something else that could benefit you. But if that's something you're concerned about or something you might want to look into taking advantage of for the schools you're applying to, make sure to research the school's requirements as well as what they look for in their students. Pre-veterinary medicine. This one is somewhat interesting to a lot of our students. I do know we get a lot of biology and chemistry students that are wanting to become veterinarians. So what is required? Again, a bachelor's degree. You definitely want to complete the prerequisite coursework. We'll talk about that more in a moment. You want to complete the GRE, the MCAT, and or the VCAT, depending on what schools you're applying to. So veterinary medicine differs a little bit because different schools will require different tests. Normally it is going to be the GRE, but you want to make sure you're taking the correct test for the schools you're applying to. And then amount of relevant experience. So if you've worked at a veterinary office, if you've got experience interning at a zoo where you have animal contact on a regular basis, that can add a lot to your application. It can account for up to 1/3 of the weight of the application, depending on which school you're applying to. Now, that doesn't mean you can't meet the minimum requirements. That is still very important, but emphasis is put on how much experience you have previously working with animals. So on average, there are twice as many applicants than available spots per application cycle. This seems like a lot, but in reality, this is a more simple playing field than a lot of the other areas. Whereas with PT school, normally one applicant is applying to, or you've got 12 applicants applying for one seat. With veterinary school, you have 2 applicants applying for 1 seat. So your chances of getting into veterinary school, if you meet all the prerequisite requirements, are a lot of times higher than it might be if you're trying to apply into a different field. Prerequisites and admission requirements are up to the discretion of the individual institutions. So veterinary schools, again, like some of the other programs, they can vary widely in what subjects, what courses they require for their prerequisites. So make sure that you review what the school requires if you're applying to it. Now, going back to the prerequisite coursework, most veterinary schools require a course in animal nutrition. That is not a course Western currently offers, and I don't foresee them offering it in the near future. So keep in mind that is a course you will need to complete at another institution if this is what you're planning on pursuing. So common things across all of the fields. We're going to be talking less specifics and more broad stuff. This is stuff you want to keep in mind regardless of what you're really focusing on. So required majors, very few. So few that I don't specifically know of any school or any program that requires you to have a specific major to apply to their school. Some schools may have a preference for a major, but very rarely do you see that. Schools have a lot of interest in having as much diversity in the cohorts that they form when it comes to the students they admit into their programs. And you don't get too much diversity if you're admitting 15 chemistry majors into a PT program. They're looking from students from different fields because having diverse perspectives on various subject matters as well as life experiences are going to make a stronger cohort, and schools want to see their cohort succeed. So they're very interested in having a diverse perspective. The major you pursue should be something you're passionate about. Now, if you come and meet with me individually and we're talking about majors, a lot of times I'm going to ask you, if you don't get into X school, what do you want to do? I'm not making any assumptions about whether you're going to get into that program or not. I ask everybody that same question. It's more of a thought experiment. If you're thinking, I'm not going to get into veterinary school, what would I want to do? Whatever that decision is, whatever that choice is, whatever you decide is what you would want to do is probably what you should be majoring in regardless, because that's probably the area where you're going to be most passionate about, and that's where you're going to see the most success in your academics. One big thing that a lot of programs ask as a part of their interview process is, why did you major in X? And knowing why you majored in something, why you're passionate about that field, is going to allow you to have a really good answer for that. Whereas if you say, I majored in X because it fit really well with me going to pharmacy school. I mean, yes, that works. That's an okay question, but it's certainly not a strong question, and it's not going to show as much passion as they're wanting to see when they ask that question. Experience hours. So while only some concentration requires experience hours, everyone will benefit from getting shadowing, internship, observation hours. Again, that goes back to understanding what you're getting into. It's a horrible feeling to go through 4 years of undergraduate experience, knowing that you're wanting to apply to a certain program, and then maybe getting into that first year of the program and realizing you don't like it. You don't like the subject. You don't want to be there, any of those things. It is a waste of your time and a waste of your money. So that's why these experience hours are important. Me speaking personally, I was going to be going to vet school, but I worked at a veterinary office. I actually worked with large animals at a zoo. And between both of those experiences, I realized I did not want to do that. Now, if I hadn't had those experiences, I probably would have still applied to veterinary school and then probably would have dropped out because I didn't like it. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't got those experiences beforehand. Volunteer hours are also something else you're going to see on some of these applications. Volunteer hours are important because you're going into helping fields. Regardless of which of these areas you go into, they are all helping fields. They are about helping people. Even if you're just helping somebody's animal, you're helping that animal because that person can't do it, and so you're helping them with it. And a lot of times you're going to have far more difficult conversations with a pet owner than you're going to have with an individual in some other fields. So that's something to keep in mind. Volunteer hours are important from that aspect because it's about helping people. Schools want to see that you have that compassion, you have the soul that is required to be someone who's going to be able to give people really great news and at the same time give people really bad news, be able to do that with a humane response, be able to do it in such a way where you're still supporting your client or your patient. They want to see that volunteer hours is how you can really show that to them on your application. This is another quote. This comes from the Assistant Dean of Albert Einstein's College of Medicine, Noreen Kerrigan. We want to make sure we're not accepting brains on stilts. We want people with hearts. That's very important. A lot of times students want to break it down to specific statistics. What's going to get me in the school? And a lot of times I can't give them that information because it's not that easy. A lot of schools are looking at what type of person are you? Do we want you as an individual in this cohort and in our school? Sometimes if a student doesn't get into a medical school, it's because they could have applied to the right school at the wrong time. Schools do look at how you're going to fit within a specific cohort. And if they don't think you're the best fit that year, it could be as simple as applying the next year and then getting in then because you fit better with that cohort of students.
Hey, Zach.
Yep.
Just really quickly,
Yep.
Going back to job shadowing and volunteer work and things like that, especially with your volunteer work, your volunteer work doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to your discipline. Certainly you want some volunteer work and some experience. Let's say, for example, you're wanting to go and be a doctor, you need some hands-on experience with patients. But if you have an interest in, I don't know, with the community table in Silva, or if you have an interest in repairing buildings at Equinox Ranch, which is a sort of a convalescent sort of therapeutic opportunity for our veterans, and it's actually in Cullowhee. So if you have those passions, I would encourage students to think about diversifying your resume in terms of your volunteer work. In terms of job shadowing too, if there are different types of topics or different types of professions within the field that you want to go into. So for example, there's different types of law, there's different types of medical doctors, there's large animal, small animal veterinarians and things of that nature. I would also encourage students to diversify the type of job shadowing that you're doing. So again, that's going to help you answer the question, why do you want to be an X type of doctor? Why do you want to be an X type of lawyer? So diversifying your experiences in both the volunteer work and your job shadowing experiences is also something that you'll want to think about.
Thank you for all that, Carrie. That's very valuable information, and I apologize for skipping over it. So more common themes. Rolling admissions. This is something a lot of students, first off, aren't aware of and then don't think about. Most professional schools are primarily interested in filling their cohort. An empty seat in a cohort it's a loss of that student graduating. It's a loss of another individual going into the field. It's also money that they could be bringing into the institution that they aren't because that seat is open. So admissions offices at these professional schools are very interested in filling their cohorts as quickly as possible. Now, that's not to say there aren't seats available for students at the tail end of applications. There are, but those are going to be really outstanding individuals, outside of the ordinary, non-average, what have you, whatever terminology you want to use. Never assume you're going to be an outlier. Always assume you're going to be average like most other students, because you've got to contemplate, how can I make sure I stand out? For some students, that is applying as soon as the application process opens. Since schools are on rolling admissions, if you're waiting until right before the admission or the application deadline, you may only be applying to 1 or 2 seats in that program. But if you apply at the beginning, you're applying to all of those seats. It comes down to a matter of percentages. What is the likelihood of you getting a seat in that program? At the beginning, it's far higher than it is at the end, simply because there are more seats that have not yet been allotted to another individual. Many programs will have priority application, priority acceptance, things like that. They go by different terminology. But if you do opt for one of those application processes where you apply to early application, if you make that application, it is expected that you're only doing that to one school, because if you get that offer from that school, it's kind of a gentleman's agreement. It's understood that you're going to accept that. Naturally, there's very little that they can do if you opt not to take that, but it does look poorly on you as an individual within that field that you're trying to go into. So that's something to keep in mind. Communication skills. So interpersonal communication skills are key in all professional fields, regardless of what field you're trying to go into. All of those fields require that you're a good communicator. You're either communicating with clients, you're communicating with patients, you're communicating with other doctors. All of those individuals, regardless of what field you're in, communication is important, that it is clear, concise, and understood. So your interpersonal communication skills will be something that is used to decide whether you're being admitted into a program or not. If you get into an interview, you have trouble speaking to other people, you're not clear with your thoughts, maybe you ramble or you get distracted easily. Each of those items can hurt you. So it's important to work on your communication skills as early as possible. If that means you're coming in to meet with me, Carrie, Sibley, whoever, and you just want to sit down and talk for a little while so that you're getting more comfortable with speaking to people you might not know as close personal individuals, that is fine. We're happy to help. Make sure you schedule a time, because all of us have busy schedules. But getting those communication skills down is important. And then again, I know I've already talked about standardized tests, but standardized tests are a big deal. Almost all programs have a standardized test requirement. Be sure you know which one is required for the schools you're applying to, and make sure that you're studying at least 6 months before taking it. Standardized tests at this point in time, so at this level when it comes to getting to a professional school, do not classify them with the SAT. Thinking about them in the same way can be detrimental to your application process and your success as an applicant. Because with an SAT, no big deal. You could go in, you could take it once, get familiar with the feel of it, become familiar with how things roll, get more comfortable with taking the test, and then take it again and score a higher score. Yes, you can still do that with each of these tests, but keep in mind that the schools you're applying to are going to see each attempt you've made on each of the tests. So they may see that you took it once and then you took it again 6 months later. And yes, you did well the second time, but you didn't do too great the first time. That information alone tells them a lot about the type of student you might be. They're going to tell that you're reactionary rather than preparatory. So it's important to score as high as possible for the first time you take that test. The only way you can assure that you're going to score as high as possible for yourself as an individual is to make sure you prepare for that test. I always advise students to try and prepare for at least 6 months before you take a standardized test. Sibley, do you want to touch any more on standardized testing?
I think you've hit the main point, is early preparation. Don't want to wait to the last minute. And there are a lot of free resources out there. This is actually versus 5-10 years ago, there's so many more resources out there right now on the web that you can access for little to no money, that can really give you a leg up in preparation and give you a heads up in terms of what you're looking for on these tests. Particularly as Zach mentioned, the LSAT is not just about the content, but it's also about the stressful environment of the test itself. And so the more research you do into those things and mentally prepare, as well as do your actual studying on the various subjects that come up in those tests, the better prepared you'll be and the more successful you'll be. So I think I'd leave it at that, and come see me if you've got questions. I have also paper, bound resources in the MTC library as well that I loan out every semester to students when they come and ask for them. So if you're worried about that, if you want to start preparing early, just want to have a conversation about it, please know that I am there for you.
right, thank you, Sibley. And with preparation and how Sibley referenced all the more or less free items available for prepping for these tests, one thing I always get confused about with students, not for any particular reason, I certainly understand why it's this way, but don't assume that buying a book on a standardized test is the best way to prep. If you're someone who doesn't like to read, if you're someone who isn't drawn to books, don't buy a book. It's probably not going to help you all that much in prepping. If you're someone who likes to watch YouTube videos, get on YouTube, watch some videos. There are so many videos on YouTube that can help you prep for many of these standardized tests. If you're someone who likes individual interaction, there are many companies out there where you can pay to hire a tutor who will interact with you as an individual and get that one-on-one experience. So over the next year or two, as you're really getting into your studies, contemplate, how do I learn best? How do I really retain information? Use that to your advantage when it comes to preparing for the standardized tests. It will help. All right, so what makes a strong candidate? High GPA and high academic achievement, those are important. They're pretty much assumed. Doesn't mean that somebody with a 2.5 won't get into medical school, won't get into whatever school. It can. The big thing is you want to make sure you're meeting the minimum requirements. Most schools will have a minimum GPA requirement that they expect of their applicants. And I will tell you, again, never assume you're going to be the outlier. When it comes to an admissions office at a professional school, they get so many applications. The first thing they do is, does this person meet our minimum requirements? If it's a yes, they go in the yes pile and they get reviewed again. If it's a no, they throw them out. And that's not meant to be harsh. That's not meant to be anything except for realistic, because there's so many applications they have to go through. They have to have ways of breaking down the stack. The first way is to make sure, are the students meeting our minimum requirements? High standardized test scores, also important. If you have a slightly low GPA, a high standardized test score can bring you up to that competitive application level. Vice versa, if you have a low standardized test score, but you got a good GPA, again, that's going to bring you up better into the competitive area. Have you completed the prerequisite requirements? That includes the observation hours and experience hours. Again, very important. It goes back to the minimum requirements. Make sure you're meeting what they require. Knowledge of the schools you're applying to and the field you wish to work in. At a base level, yes, you're applying to a school, but as part of this application process, you're also applying to a job, because you are representing these schools when you go out into the career field that you're going to be working in. It's important that you know about the schools you're applying to, just as it's important you know about the companies you're trying to work for. They want to know that there's a reason you're wanting to work with them, for them, go to their school, etc. You can't do that if you haven't done your research on the school. Completing an appropriate number of applications. All of that information can be found online. If it comes down to, why didn't I get in? You may have a high GPA. You may have a high standardized score. On paper, you look good, but if you apply to 2 schools, your chances of getting in are far lower than if you had applied to 10 schools. I'm not sitting here and saying anybody should spend bukus of money to apply to schools, because it is an expensive process. But it's important that you go ahead and start saving up money now, so that when it comes time for you to apply, you've got enough funds to apply to as many schools as possible, so that you stay in that competitive range. And then maintaining strong connections with professors and professionals who will provide letters of recommendation. This is an important thing. You're starting in your prerequisite courses right now, many of you, and you may have good interactions with those professors. It's important to keep those relationships strong, because if you have Chem 139 your first year and you become really close with that professor during that semester, but then you start asking for a recommendation letter during your senior year, and you haven't really spoken with that professor in the past 3 years, they're going to have trouble writing that recommendation letter for you. It's not because they don't like you anymore or they're upset or anything like that. They just don't know you as well as they knew you your first year. Keep up with those relationships. They'll pay dividends when it comes time for you to apply to those schools. Professionals are also important. Like we said before, me, Carrie, Sibley, we each have things that can help you and benefit you in your application process. Come and talk to us. We are experts in our field, or at least as close as you're going to get to experts in our field. At this institution, we are here to help. That is our job. That is our passion. That is what we like to do. Don't think that you're going to be burdening us by coming in and asking us questions. That is why we are here. What can your advisor do for you? I think we've already talked about a lot of this during this presentation, but I'll run through it quickly. A lot of this becomes more important later on in the process, but you can still come and talk to us right now. Personal statement review, when it comes time for that, that is something that me and Carrie really specialize in. Same with mock interviews. Assistance with looking up specific institution requirements. A lot of times that's going to be more something me and Emily Sharp do. Assistance in determining best letters of support or references for application. Again, this is probably me and Carrie. Presentation and interview skills in preparation for professional school interviews. If you find out soon enough that you've got a professional school interview and you want to have a mock interview with a group of people, let us know well ahead of time. It's not because we want to be stingy with our time, it's because we have busy schedules. And if you let us know ahead of time, well enough of time, we can arrange something so that you can get a high quality mock interview. And if you want me, Carrie, Sibley, Emily, whoever to be there, we can usually try our best to arrange to have as many people there who can let you know what you might want to work on and what you're doing really well about that interview process. Information regarding appropriate resources, that's all of us. Each of us have different areas of knowledge. Each of us are beneficial in some way. And then standardized test preparation strategies and information for resources. That is primarily Sibley. A lot of times students come to me asking questions, and a lot of times I send them to Sibley. So if it's standardized test questions, always go to Sibley first. And then when should you start? Today. Carrie made that point very clear at the beginning. Today is the day you should start. Making one bad grade, one bad decision, having one bad semester, each of those things can be detrimental to succeeding at your goals. Now, does that mean that they're going to cancel out your goals and you're not going to be able to reach them? Absolutely not. It's just going to make that path to getting there a little bit more difficult for you. And we're about making it as easy as possible. And the best way to keep it easy is to be as prepared as possible and do as well as you can. Begin researching the schools you wish to apply to and the subject you wish to study. I always recommend students, as they start determining which schools they want to apply to, develop a spreadsheet. Have that school's requirements listed out on that spreadsheet. Put X's in each of those columns as you complete the requirements. That way, when it comes time for you to apply, you don't have to go back and research those schools again. Okay, am I wasting my money? Am I not? Should I apply to this school? Should I not? You've got it on a spreadsheet, and it's going to tell you all the information you need to know. Connect with professors and other students who have similar interests. This is very important, especially for pre-law students, pre-vet students, pre-med students. There are professors on this campus who have worked in each of those professions that you're wanting to go into. Seek them out, talk to them. It will benefit you. They're going to help you understand more about the field than you'll probably be able to find online because they've lived it. Take advantage of them as resources, as people you can go and seek for advice. Recommendations, etc. They are great sources of knowledge. I have yet to meet a professor on this campus who doesn't want to talk to a student about what they've done before in their field. They're always very passionate about what they've done. Join clubs and seek out leadership opportunities. That shows that you have a desire to lead. That does not mean you need to join the pre-health club, the pre-med club, the pre-dental club, any of those clubs. You're more than welcome to, and they're great clubs to join, but don't think it's just limited to that when I'm making these recommendations. If you can get a leadership role in any club or organization, that's going to help you on your application, but be someone who wants to lead if you're going to seek out a position for that. If you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to lead, that's fine. As long as you're aware of your skill sets and you offer up those skill sets in those environments, that is going to give you important experiences that you can use in your application and your interviews. And then begin saving. The application process is expensive. It's not that it can be expensive, it is expensive. There are fee assistance programs available to students if they meet the requirements for those, but don't bank on that. You may get into a year where the economy's not been too great and those offerings are a little bit less than they've been in the past. Your ability to get into that area where you're getting those benefits may not be as easy as it has been in the past. So it's best to just go ahead and assume I'm going to be doing this with money out of my pocket. This is what I'm wanting to do. Go ahead and start saving for it. If you save $25 a month for the next 4 years, that's still a good chunk of change that you're not having to find the minute you're trying to apply to these schools. As long as you plan for it, it's going to make it simpler. And then continued, definitely start working on your professionalism and communication skills. One thing that always it doesn't like irk me or upset me, but it always concerns me is if I get an email from a student who I know is a pre-professional student and the email is poorly worded, it's not formatted, they clearly didn't care about what they were writing. I get concerned because I'm thinking, is this how they're going to be applying to their schools? Is this how they're going to be communicating with their professors? Is this how they're going to look as a professional when it comes time for them to be doing this stuff? So it's important to go ahead and start working on these skills now. If you're formatting proper professional emails to professors, friends, anybody right now, it's going to make it far easier down the road when that becomes far more important than it is right now. When you attend your shadowing observation opportunities, dress as though you are a doctor at that office. You may not have the degree yet, you may not have the name tag, you may not have a white coat, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be dressing professionally. Clients, patients, anybody who's in one of those offices is going to be concerned about how the people who are working there present themselves. And if the doctor is dressed well, but they've got somebody shadowing them who's in a t-shirt and shorts, not only is that patient probably going to be concerned about their privacy when it comes to what's being shared, but they're also going to probably think a little bit less of that doctor in the office they're working in. So when you're doing those shadowing opportunities, make sure you are dressing as though you're there to present a good image for the area that you're in. And then anytime you are working on something associated with your professional future, dress for it. Interviews, meetings, conferences, school tours, if you're doing a mock interview, if you're coming to talk to one of us, you should still be dressing up as though you're speaking with somebody who has some play on what your future is going to be in that professional field. That doesn't mean you need to wear a tie when you're coming to speak with Sibley and Carrie and I. It's not that important, but the sooner you get comfortable with what you're going to be doing as a professional, the better you're going to feel when you're doing it. You're not going to be able to wear your PJs when you go and you're working in a pharmacy after you graduate from pharmacy school. You're not going to be able to wear your PJs to pharmacy school at all. Usually pharmacy schools have a dress code where you've got to wear at least a shirt with a collar. And so the sooner you can get comfortable with that dress code, the better off you're going to be. You're going to feel less alienated when you have to start doing that once you get to those schools. And then resources to keep in mind on campus. You've got me and Emily Sharp in the advising centers. Emily's in the Honors College. You got the Math Tutoring Center where Sibley is king. You got the Writing and Learning Commons. They tutor for all subjects except for math. They're great people. Don't be nervous about going in there. Center for Career and Professional Development. You've got Carrie and the other members of that office. Everybody there is there to help. Major advisors, depending on what major you're in, your advisor, your faculty advisor from that field may have experiences you're not as aware of. If you're in biology, I know that there's a biology faculty member who is a licensed veterinarian. Seek them out, talk to them about their experience. There are lawyers in the business college who still are certified or licensed lawyers. Seek them out, talk to them. Those people exist at this institution. I'm not going to tell you exactly who they are because you need to do a little bit of digging to see who they are. And then the Honors College, if you're in the Honors College, that is always a resource as well. Now, time for questions. It would be best, I think, if you do the chat situation with your questions just to keep people from talking over one another. So if you're not familiar with how to work the chat system, let's see. It's going to be a little option down at the bottom of your page.
Zach, while they do that, I'm just going to type in the Career Center's direct link for anyone who would like to go ahead and check out our online resources that we have. We are seeing students, but we're seeing them virtually through Zoom this semester, and we have a number of online resources. My favorite one is called Big Interview. You know, you were talking a lot about the interview process to get into these schools. And with Big Interview, they have a pretty robust platform for admissions interviews for a variety of different disciplines. So I would check that out, go to that website, scroll down to the bottom to see all of our online resources.
All right, thank you, Carrie. And Sibley, would you like to talk about how tutoring is being done this semester?
You mean just in general terms or specific to, I know we have a date booked for the GRE. Is that what you're more focusing on, or just tutoring in general being online?
Both. I know that
Okay.
Tutoring for Math Tutoring Center and the Walk are online this semester, but also if you wanted to talk about anything that is currently set up or in the plans for standardized testing, I think that would be good as well.
Sure. I just stuck something in the chat. Our website address is not conducive to this chat, but if you're on Western Site and you search for MTC, it will take you directly to the Math Tutoring Center link. And we have some professional test prep resources available through our website. And also, if you just go on Western Site and search for GRE, MCAT, or LSAT, and you will pull up a page for each of those that has resources, links to free online resources, links to some paid for resources that, like Zach mentioned earlier, places where you can hire professional help to study for some of these tests. So those are good places to go ahead and start exploring. And if you've got questions, feel free to reach out. Again, looking at those things now, not only is medical school or some of these other places, they're expensive to apply to, but these tests are expensive. If you're going to have to take a test twice, you may be looking at $400 gone. And so just prepare for that. Think about that, save up, and start thinking about that now, just so you're prepared. And in general, I guess just to tag off of that, tutoring services are online. I know the Math Tutoring Center, we're offering a blended model. So we have tutors that specific to math. We get a lot of GRE math questions. We have drop-in tutors on duty online, 9 to 9 Monday through Thursday and 9 to 5 Friday. And you can bring in your math questions about the GRE. The Writing and Learning Commons and us, we partner a lot. So we ask students if they're preparing for the GRE, if they're worried about the writing prompts for the writing portion of the GRE, take those to the walk. Those tutors are there. Those writing fellows, a lot of them can gladly help you. Many of them are grad students, so they've been through the GRE themselves. They can help you prepare some of those writing prompts so that you can do well on those. And we've got a lot of good tutors that help you with the different parts of the GRE math. So statistics, trigonometry, your good old Pythagorean theorem and solving right triangle problems that will pop up on a lot of these standardized tests. We can help with those too. So look to us not only as a resource for some of these test prep services, but also for general questions about specific problems you run into. If you're searching out practice tests online and you come up on questions that you don't know how to approach, reach out to us. And if we don't help specifically in the Math Tutoring Center for a type of question, then I certainly won't just turn you away. I'll try to find someone else or someone in the other tutoring center to help you with those. So.
All right, and I'm going to share my screen one last time. We do have our pre-professional advising page. It is through the Advising Center webpage. You can see the path there. What I always advise students, if you go to the search bar on the WCU homepage, type in Advising Center, click into the Advising Center. At the bottom of the page, you'll see a link for pre-professional advising. It will take you to this page. A lot of the resources that we've spoken about are listed on this page. You've got information on those standardized tests that Sibley keeps up with as well. We've got information on the Facebook page, and then each of the specific advising sheets for each of the fields that we focus on are available. These are typically updated each summer. And so the ones that are currently linked here are the most up to date. I updated them either in July or June. And so they're there for your perusal. This year, they're a little bit new in the fact that they have active hyperlinks. And so each of those pages gives a lot of good information as well as linking you to specific websites you'll need to know for those specific fields. So this is a good website to be familiar with.
We have a question about how soon should they apply for pre-PT schools. And I would say that depends on the school, but typically summer/fall semester of your senior year is usually when those schools will start the application process for the following school year.
Yep, Carrie is correct with that. Usually with professional schools, you're looking at about a year of a process. You're usually going to be applying about a year before you're going to be starting. And so if you know you want to start fall of 2020, then you would have started your application process either in summer or fall of 2019 to get there. The times vary a little bit by program, and in certain programs, certain schools will have different deadlines, but usually you're looking at about a year for the process.
And that reminds me, Zach, I meant to put this out there too. So the Career Center is offering virtual career fairs this year, and our graduate schools also recruit students during our career fairs. So for those of you who are wanting to go into law school, that career fair is coming up in 2 weeks, September the 9th, through your JobCat portal. Log into your MyWCU, click on jobs, and boom, you're in JobCat. It's pretty simple. And then just click on events, upload your resume to JobCat. Go ahead and start talking to some of these schools. I know we've got Elon School of Law, we've got a law school in Atlanta and a law school in Tennessee, and I want to say there might even be 1 or 2 others. Law schools for some reason are just really into our career fairs sometimes. If you're wanting to go into medical school, occupational therapy, things like that, we do have an osteopathic school attending our STEM fair, which is September the 23rd, from 11 to 3. All of our fairs are from 11 to 3 online through JobCat. And I believe there's a traditional medical school that has also signed up so far. And of course, we've got our business fair, which is October 7th, and our construction and interior design fair, which is October the 21st. But I would say the government law and social justice fair, which is September 9th, or the STEM fair for most of our students in today's session, you'll probably want to check that out. Go ahead and start talking with admissions counselors from these schools. Ask your questions about what it's like on their campuses, what it's like to apply to their schools and things of that nature. You can also talk with employers in these sectors about what they look for in applicants in terms of once you finish these schools. You might even be able to find some volunteer opportunities that you need to go ahead and get started on. So I would highly encourage you all to consider our virtual career fairs through JobCat, which again, you can get to through your MyWCU. There's a question that says, what opportunities are there for shadowing an osteopathic physician?
So with shadowing in general, I'm sure many of y'all have noticed, but it's quite a drive to get to the closest McDonald's in our area. As such, you can kind of discern that we don't have the largest area of infrastructure around us as an institution. That makes shadowing opportunities rather difficult to find immediately around the institution. We don't have anything directly arranged between Western and any particular office or entity to do shadowing and internship hours. Sometimes specific majors will have that, but we as an institution / we as pre-professional advising do not have that. What I always advise students, if you are looking for specific shadowing, think about what's available where you live. A lot of times there's going to be more available where you reside during the summers or on break. And that's usually going to be the best time for you to get that experience as well, because you're going to be less focused on schoolwork. That is a good question, osteopathic physician for sure. And if you're having trouble finding a specific type of physician, like you want to be with an osteopathic, you want to be with an allopathic, whatever you're looking for, maybe dermatologist, get online and Google so-and-so in this area. Most doctors' practices nowadays have online websites where they list out the doctors that work in their practices. On pretty much all of those websites that I've ever seen, they also indicate what that doctor's degree is in. And so that's a good way to do research to see what types of doctors are available in the area to shadow with.
Just in speaking about shadowing opportunities too, I don't know how most employers feel about job shadowing right now because of COVID, so you'll also want to keep that in mind. Hopefully this time next year, we'll be having a completely different conversation. It could be pretty difficult to find a job shadowing experience in person right now. So just keep that in mind too.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. I'm glad you brought that up. So COVID-19 has thrown a wrench into a lot of processes. One thing you shouldn't do is assume that being in school during COVID-19 is going to make you a weaker applicant. It's not. Because the great thing about COVID-19 is it affected everybody. It's affected every student in the US, in the world. It's affected every professional program. As such, everybody's kind of on the same playing field when it comes to how is this affecting me. Med schools are having to adjust how they're working their applications. Same with all the other schools. So don't think that it's going to be detrimental to you. I have heard that concern from a lot of students recently. Don't let it get to you just yet. If it becomes a bit of an issue later on, if the fields see it as being an issue in some areas, I will learn about it and I will certainly let you all know. But for right now, it's not something you really need to be concerned about. Something else to think about, Carrie made a mention of shadowing, and then that reminded me about PA. So right now, the governing body for physician assistants have approved virtual shadowing as an opportunity. If that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend you do your internet research to find out more information on that. It's not something that every PA is doing because it's not something every PA is comfortable with doing, but there are PAs out there that are doing virtual shadowing so that you can chat with that PA, you can see what they're doing in their job, you can ask them questions, you can learn more about that field. Physician assistant is the only field I've really heard that about currently, but I'm sure there are other fields out there that have that as an option right now. Big thing is just do your research.
We have another question about how to approach a vet clinic and ask about possible shadowing and internships. Anytime you approach anyone about job shadowing and internships and things like that, have a resume prepared to send to them. I personally like to call people first and ask for someone who can talk to you about possible job shadowing and a possible internship with their clinic. And then as you're talking to that person on the phone, get their email address and say, you know, I'm happy to send you my resume and cover letter. Is there a good email for me to send that to? I'm happy to coach students individually, and I'm sure Zach is too, on the type of communication that you should be using and the type of language that you should be using whenever you approach somebody and ask them for those job shadowing and internship opportunities. But definitely be prepared with a resume. I highly recommend that you get a career counselor from our career center to look over your resume. Because in my experience, student resumes need quite a bit of work. I'm not trying to put anybody down. It's just resumes, for some reason, I guess because it's just a one-page document, people think it's easy to put together, and they're not. So to do it well, you actually have to put in quite a bit of effort, and we are more than happy to help you get that started. Another question, is pre-med any different for someone like me to be a medical examiner than someone who just wants to be a physician? You still have to go to medical school if you want to be a medical examiner. And in fact, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, I believe in your residency, medical examiners actually spend a little bit more time in their schooling. Is that correct, Zach?
To my knowledge, yes. So across the field of medicine, so specifically osteopathic, allopathic doctors, the way it's going to work, you're going to do your med school program. And when you start getting your experiences, you're doing your residencies, that is when you become specialized and you start focusing on the areas you want to be in. And so with a medical examiner, that's when you'd start working towards becoming a medical examiner. Your first priority needs to be getting into and then through med school. And that's where they will explain to you how the specialization process works. If you're interested in dermatology, it also works that way. Most dermatologists are coming out of it with an MED or a DO.
We have a question about, do we have any specialists in immigration law on campus? Not that I'm aware of, but someone to add. I would probably encourage people to ask departments, like faculty members, if they're connected with certain types of lawyers and things of that nature. LinkedIn is also a really great resource, and I'm happy to show students how to use LinkedIn to find people to do informational interviews. or perhaps to job shadow and things like that. LinkedIn is a wonderful 21st century networking tool. So not to my knowledge, do you guys know of any immigration lawyers on campus?
No, truthfully, I don't think we're a big enough city for an immigration lawyer to find a lot of footing. If you are looking someplace like Raleigh, there are probably immigration lawyers all over the place in that area. But that's typically where you find individuals that specialize in immigration law, areas where there's a higher population of individuals, because that's where they're more needed.
How's everyone feeling? We threw a lot of information at you, and I'm just curious, or I'm hoping that you all feel empowered. I knew this was a lot of information, and I hope no one feels like it's impossible. It's not. That's why the three of us exist, plus a whole slew of other faculty and staff members to help you get to that next step. But we would rather you have the facts up front so that you know what you're getting into.
Yes. And if at any point you become concerned, you're like, oh, I did this, there's no way I'm getting into school now, whatever that school is, come and talk to me. You can also go talk to Carrie, go talk to Sibley. They're both wonderfully supportive people. But a golden rule with professional school is just because you may not be able to get in now doesn't mean you won't be able to get in the future. Now might not be the right time for you to get into med school. 4 years from now when you graduate might not be the best time for you to get into med school, but maybe a few years after that could be your time. Different fields work kind of in different ways, but don't stress if something happens and you get knocked off your path a little bit. As an example, I'm going to speak of myself again. I have been out of undergraduate for 12 years now. I went through one master's program, kind of started on another master's program, and now I've gotten it in my mind that I'm going to pharmacy school. Now I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody, oh, I'm going to pharmacy school. I tell everybody I'm applying to pharmacy school because I certainly won't know if I'm getting in until I do that. And that's still 2 years down the road for me. But I understand that's what my path looks like. If I'm on a 15-year path to getting to pharmacy school, that's fine, as long as I still get there. Your path, I hope, doesn't take you that long, but if it takes you a little bit longer than 4 years, that is fine. As long as this continues to be a goal of yours, keep it a goal. We are here to help you get to your goal, but we will be real with you. We're not in the business of having you waste your money if we don't know that you're going to be successful the first time around. And there's no guarantee, even if you're the most competitive applicant at Western, that you're going to get in the first time you apply to a school. Unfortunately, the system just doesn't work that way. But we are not here to break hearts. We're not here to change minds. We are here to provide you with information. Never be nervous or scared about coming and talk with us.
And on that notion too, there's no shame in taking a gap year. If you do take a gap year though, you do need to think about how you're going to spend that year. Don't just spend the year sitting at home, but you can spend that year becoming a more competitive applicant as well. So these are all topics that I and my colleagues in the Career Center would love to talk to you about. I'm sure Zach and Emily as well. We can do career planning, professional development planning, starting with your first semester here at Western all the way up until you apply for your school's your senior year. So use your resources. We're included in your tuition. So
That we are.
And also something else for you all to know too, everything that we offer to, at least in the Career Center, everything that we offer to our students, we also offer to you as an alum. Last semester, I counseled someone who graduated the year I was born. So that was fun. So once a catamount, always a catamount in the Career Center. Please know that we are here to support you even after you cross the stage.
Same with me and Emily Sharp in pre-professional advising. It's kind of one of the ethical codes we go by as pre-professional advisors is we don't turn anybody away. We may turn them around and send them to somebody else who might be better suited to advising that individual, like Emily with honors college, me with non-honors college students. But if somebody comes to us, even if they are not associated with Western at all, but they're living in the region, and they're like, hey, these are my goals. We're going to help them. You could have graduated from Western 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what have you. We will still be here to assist you in your pre-professional goals. Looks like we got another question. Is the competitiveness different getting into pre-PT school in every state, or is it all the same amount of competition? It's roughly all the same. Again, that's not a super easy question to answer, but in general, PT school is very difficult to get into right now. Not impossible, just when you compare it to other programs, it's quite difficult. You could probably find a school that doesn't get as many applicants going to it. It may just be in an unfavorable location, just kind of in a weird state, in a weird city, something like that. But PT as a field is in so demand right now that most students are going to be applying to even those oddball schools, because many students are interested in becoming a PT. They're not so interested in going to X school to become a PT. And that's one of the reasons applying to as many schools as possible is important, because when you graduate, you're going to be able to say, I am a doctor in this field. You're not necessarily going to go around telling people, I'm a doctor in this field and I graduated from this school. Yes, it's important. Yes, it matters. But what's more important is that you get that degree and you're practicing in the field you want to be in.
And that you pass the licensure examination point.
Yes, that is also very important.
It doesn't matter if you graduated from Harvard School of Law. If you can't pass the board certification at the end, it doesn't mean anything.
And what Carrie's talking about with the board certification, that sounds like a law term. Every field will have a test that you have to pass when you graduate so that you're fully licensed in that field. And many of the fields have continuing education requirements that go on with maintaining that license in that field. So if you're someone who doesn't like education, but you're driven to get through this goal, understand that if you're getting into one of these fields, you will continue your education until you leave your field, hopefully at retirement. I was on mute. Do we have any more questions before we go? And just because we're ending this presentation doesn't mean we have to end this conversation. If you've got more questions later on, you're more than welcome to email me, Carrie, Sibley, or all three of us at one time. Don't be nervous about contacting us. All right. Oh, thank you, Carrie. And I will include my email as well, even though I'm sure many of y'all are already tired of getting emails from me. All right. So I'll give you a few seconds to copy those down if you want to, and then we will call this presentation done for this year. Thank you all for coming. I hope you find value in what we had to say. And again, if anything was unclear, you want more information on anything, feel free to contact us. All right. Sibley, Carrie, anything else to add?
I would just say you're welcome and thanks for being here. And the fact that you took the time to be here on a Wednesday evening for 2 hours says a lot about your desire to succeed, and you should be proud of that. These are stressful times. We are all here to help you, so do not ever feel like you would be a bother or we would not want to talk to you, because we will. I think all three of us, I speak for all of us, we all have, we're here for you. So it's on you if you don't reach out, because the resources are here and they're free. You've already paid for them. So please take advantage of them. If I can help you, and I know Zach and Carrie are the same way, we definitely will help you.
All right. Thank y'all.